Envoy of Lights presents Lopsided Minds, Part 7, A Symphony of Intricacy. Written and spoken by Dr. Sean Shamaradian.
In the name of the omnipotent, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, omnitemporal, and omniscient God, the most merciful, the most gracious, and the most compassionate, the eminence, the proprietor of patient, space, time, and beyond, the fiduciary, the adjudicator, custodian, and the high judge, the umpire of all there is and the non-existence, the holder of the truth, justice, and equity in the name of the Almighty God. Rumi, the deeper self is rooted in God. According to Khayyam, we cannot know the ultimate truth, so stop worrying. He might have meant well, but if we cannot know, as Khayyam believed, how did he know we cannot know? Besides, if life is uncertain, Khayyam tends to enjoy wine and companionship, not realizing pleasure is temporary. If existence is absurd or meaningless, pleasure does not answer the deeper existential questions. You escape anxiety but do not answer it. Rejecting bad theologians does not dissolve God. It attacks religious institutions, not metaphysical truth. If life is fleeting and uncertain as Khayyam taught, then does it make it meaningless or more precious? He believed that since we do not know, we enjoy. But since we do not know, we should search deeper. He leaves humanity with uncertainty, fate, pleasure, and irony as Epicureanism and modern secular existentialism have. Khayyam sees uncertainty everywhere. Rumi sees divine presence everywhere. Khayyam questions the afterlife, destiny, and religious certainty. Rumi accepts mystery but embraces it as intimacy with God. Khayyam's tone, ironic, skeptical, sometimes melancholic. Rumi's tone is ecstatic, mystical, overflowing with love. Khayyam, since we do not know, enjoy the present. Rumi, God is real, dissolve into God. Khayyam assumes that divine silence is equivalent to divine absence, but silence does not logically prove non-existence. He should have tried to hear his mind or the impact of the environment on his senses, and the effect of his senses on his nervous system, without which he would not be able to live. Khayyam's famous theme, the moving finger rides. This leans towards determinism. If everything is written, moral accountability collapses. Rumi responds that you are written, but you are also participating. Divine will and human will interweave. Khayyam's suffering highlights absurdity. Rumi, suffering refines the soul. Is it not what Buddha did? Without Khayyam, Rumi can become naive. Without Rumi, Khayyam can become hollow. Again, the universe works through opposition, not to exclude contrasting human views in search of a deeper reality and maybe one day the ultimate truth, reaching God and kneeling to be freed from the clutches of ignorance finally. Ibn Arabi's metaphysical vision of God is deep. He taught that there is only one existence, God, the unity of being, Wahdat al-Wujud. Everything else does not have independent existence. Creation is not separate from God. It is a manifestation of God's name and attributes. Existence is one. Its reality is God. This does not mean that creation is God in a crude sense. Rather, God is the only necessary being. The world is a reflection, like an image in a mirror. Multiplicity is appearance. Unity is reality. This is metaphysical monotheism at its highest. God is known through self-disclosure, tajalli. Ibn Arabi teaches that God constantly reveals God through creation. God never ceases revealing himself in new forms. Every moment is a fresh divine manifestation. Nothing is static. The universe is a continuous divine self-disclosure. This explains change, diversity and beauty, even opposites, mercy and wrath. God is beyond all consciousness, yet present in all forms. He stated, "He who limits God denies God." God cannot be confined to a mental image, a theological formula, a single religious expression. Yet God is present in every sincere form of worship. He famously says, "My heart has become capable of every form. It is a pasture for gazelles and a monastery for monks." According to Ibn Arabi, the human being is the most complete mirror of God. The perfect human reflects all divine names in balance. The universe reflects God partially. The human being reflects God most fully. Rumi says, "You are separate but yearning." Ibn Arabi says, "You were never separate in reality." Rumi speaks to the heart. Ibn Arabi speaks to the metaphysical structure. Omar Khayyam sees randomness, suffering, and cosmic indifference. Ibn Arabi responds indirectly, "You are judging from the level of multiplicity, not unity. From the absolute level, everything unfolds within divine wisdom." The real God is the mirror in which you see yourself, and you are the mirror in which God sees his name. Creation gains existence through God. God knows himself through creation. It's a reciprocal reflection, but asymmetrical, having two sides or halves that are not the same. He solves the paradox that God is one, the world is many, the one appears as many without dividing. This is extremely sophisticated metaphysics. Some scholars accused Ibn Arabi of opening the door to pantheism. Some even considered his views dangerous. But Ibn Arabi believed reality is not fragmented. Reality is whole. The fracture only exists at the level of perception. In response to why we experience separation and being alienated, we suffer injustice. What about evil? Ibn Arabi does not say evil is good. He says what appears evil from a partial perspective may be harmonious in the totality of things. The fact that existence is a divine manifestation does not erase responsibility, morality, and correct thinking. Suffering exists because multiplicity exists. Multiplicity exists because divine names must appear. All is within divine wisdom. even what we cannot grasp. If we knew everything, we wouldn't be relatively oriented. Only the absolute God knows everything where we come short. When Nagarjuna, a Buddhist, is asked, can anything exist independently? He says no. But then the infinitely not independent things that Buddhism believes are dependent on. What or who? Buddhism holds that nothing exists independently and that everything arises from causes and conditions and that everything depends on everything else. This analogy is wrong because things must stop at some point. Nothing can regress infinitely. Yes, everything depends on everything else, but how far can this regression carry on reaching infinity if not stopped at a non-dependent being? If everything is empty, is the moral truth they rely on empty? Is suffering empty? If everything lacks essence, some say this risks sliding into the view that nothing really matters. They believe emptiness applies to inherent existence. But if all views are empty, then the doctrine of emptiness is also empty. Is enlightenment empty? It is a mental revolutionary success, a progressive phase of human thoughtfulness and perception at its peak. This exhibits philosophical escape rather than resolution. For Aristotelian or classical theistic frameworks, reality must have a grounded substance, an ultimate foundation to stand on. Emptiness denies intrinsic substance at every level. This creates a regression of dependent relations without a final state. Buddhism's view is more alike to a nihilistic doctrine than the truth. Moreover, if there is no God in Buddhism, who manages karma? Who judges? Who ensures justice? Doesn't karma require a divine overseer? Since in Buddhism there is no creator God, no final judge, no cosmic accountant, they believe karma operates as a natural law similar to gravity. Gravity pulls without moral evaluation. Karma functions as an impersonal, unbiased, neutral, causal principle. Karma is intentional action, especially mental intention. There is no judge. The action itself carries its consequence within the causal fabric of reality. They believe that if you plant an orange seed, you get an orange tree. If a poison seed, you get a toxic plant. No divine gardener is needed. This entire doctrine is contradictory. It is unbelievably meaningless. How does the universe calculate moral precision or any wrongdoing without intelligence? No judge, no overseer, just interdependent processes. Believing moral causation is built into reality. But who is the builder? What architecture constitutes such moral causation? But how can any unintelligent, unaware reality sustain moral judgment? Practical karma demands an absolute divine governor. It seems the whole school of thought has lost its wit. No creator God, no final day, no eternal soul. Suffering arises from ignorance. Liberation comes from wisdom. There is no courtroom, no divine will, no moral ruler. Justice is automatic. It looks like Buddhism has lost the meaning of moral laws. Belief that karma is built into the causal structure. But how can any orderly law, any unaware cause, act equitably and be justified without a mind? Moral laws, wisdom, karma, liberation, intention, and many other decisive factors refer to a fabulous conscious mind to make sense of the complexity of human conduct. What do they mean by karma is built into causal structure, but who is the builder? If the person who suffers is not numerically identical to the wrongdoers, is that justice or karma? How can there be moral justice without a moral mind? If there is no enduring soul, who exactly receives the karmic result? Justice requires awareness. They believe consciousness and intention themselves are part of the causal web. But consciousness and intention are the undeniable parts of an aware mind, or as they put it, a causal web. How can anyone face such clarity with deliberate flaws and ignorance? Replacing the universal consciousness with causal web terminology, playing with words and denying the cosmic essence, depriving it of its brilliance, awareness, and enlightening attributes is extremely contradictory to the laws of karma. It does not make any sense. There is no kernel in Buddhism. It is like a walnut empty of its core. It does not differ from non-believers who hold tight to senseless, dull, destructive, and insensitive matter that has created beyond imagination cosmic marvels and universal ecstasy, a state of expanded spiritual being, a union with the divinity, with the love of God. Whether Buddhists know it or not, a path of karma, the sum of a person's actions in this and previous states of existence, viewed as deciding their fate in future existence or lives, and dharma, the right way of living and the path of righteousness or order and eternal truth. Without guidance, Buddhism is put in parallel with Darwinism, a godless view, a scientific theory, a framework that holds the evolutionary process is devoid of guidance, empty of marvelously intelligent counsel, hallucinating that evolution maneuvers and gradually propels blindly, running for billions of years flawlessly. If this is not schizophrenia, a severe chronic disorder to interpret reality abnormally involving delusions and disorganized thinking, I do not know what it is. The mind-bending example below, a rather bizarre, miraculous, and infinitely brilliant event, perhaps awakens Buddhists to think twice about the amazingly unbounded, intelligent designer. For instance, what would happen to us, to existence, if electrons in our atoms and in our atmosphere did not repel each other? Do we not then penetrate each other, entering one another? Without electron repulsion, matter would not remain separate. We would pass through each other and likely collapse into extremely dense matter. Life would not be the same as we know it, livable. Atoms are mostly space, so why don't your hand and wall pass through each other? Because electrons all transfer and move a negative charge, rebuff other electrons, Coulomb pull repulsion. Obey quantum rules that prevent them from occupying the same state, Pauli exclusion principle. When you press your hand against a table, the electrons in your hand repel the electrons in the table. The repulsion is what you feel as solidity. Touch is the real electromagnetic repulsion. If electrons did not repel each other, matter would lose solidity. Your atoms could slide into others. There would be no effective barriers between objects, no resistance when two materials meet or collide. Objects could interpenetrate. You and the chair or another being would overlay. Electrons' repulsion keeps atoms stable at a certain size. Without it, electrons would be pulled tightly towards the nucleus. Atoms would shrink dramatically. Ordinary matter would compress enormously. One's body would collapse into an incredibly dense state, something closer to exotic stellar, relating to stars matter. Chemical bonds depend on electron structure, electron repulsion, and attraction. Without repulsion, molecules would not form normally. Biology would fail instantly. No cells, no DNA, no life chemistry, no life at all. Life would be impossible. Two people slowly blending like mist, fog, smoke, haze. All matter loses structure and collapses inward, a catastrophic structural failure. In conclusion, without that force or repulsion, no solid object, no stable atoms, no stars like our sun, no chemistry, no biology, no life, the whole macroscopic universe as we know it would not exist. Even if repulsion disappeared, quantum mechanics' Pauli exclusion principle would still prevent electrons from fully occupying identical states, but the universe would still be radically different and extremely unstable. Electron repulsion is one of the main reasons your hand stops at the wall. We would not remain distinct bodies. The structure of reality would collapse. The profound situation is that solidity holds an illusion created by invisible forces. We are not solid in the classical sense. We are structured fields held apart by electromagnetic interaction. Then the non-believers, the Buddhists, reject the unseen God, denying its majestic life-bearing traces. But if electrons repel each other, why can we penetrate liquids such as water? Yes, electrons repel each other because they carry negative charge. The repulsion is actually what prevents solid objects from passing through each other. The answer to why we move through water lies in structure and spacing. In solids like steel or wood, atoms are tightly packed. They are locked into a rigid lattice or network. Electron clouds strongly resist displacement. When you try to push your hand through a wall, the electron clouds in your atoms and the wall's atoms rebuff strongly and cannot easily rearrange. So you feel a solid barrier. In liquid water, molecules are close together but not locked in fixed positions. They are constantly moving. They can slide past one another. When your hand enters water, electron repulsion still happens, but the water molecules can move aside. They rearrange instead of resisting atoms. So You are not passing through atoms. You are pushing them out of the way. Why still feel resistance? Water still pushes back. That's fluid resistance, drag, pressure, and viscosity. If electron repulsion did not exist at all, your hand would pass through everything. Atoms would collapse into each other. Matter as we know it would not exist. Electron repulsion allows for touch, pressure, solidity, and physical existence. When you touch water, you never actually touch nuclei. You are interacting through electromagnetic forces between electron clouds. All physical contact in the universe is really a force interaction at very short distances. Not a true physical meaning. Why are gases so easy to pass through? Take air, it is mostly nitrogen, minus 78%, oxygen, minus 21%. In a gas, molecules are far apart compared to their size. There is an enormous space between them. They move freely and very rapidly. When you walk through the air, you are barely displacing anything. The molecules move aside. Collisions happen, but they are sparse, scattered, sporadic, infrequent. That is why gases offer very little resistance compared to liquid, almost none compared to solid. You are not penetrating atoms. You are moving through vast microscopic space. Electron repulsion is due to the electromagnetic force. If that force vanishes, electrons would no longer resist being compressed together. Matter would lose its structural boundaries, collapse inward, densify catastrophically. You would not sink through the earth. You and earth would merge into a collapsing mass of nuclei and electrons. Your body would not remain a body. When you place your hand in water, you are witnessing the electromagnetic force, quantum mechanics, molecular mobility, and the delicate balance between attraction and repulsion. All existence depends on a precise balance, since attraction pulls matter and repulsion prevents total collapse. If either dominates completely, the universe we know disappears. What we call empty isn't truly empty. An atom's electron cloud is a probability field, a region where the electrons are likely to be found, a quantum wave structure. When two atoms approach, their wave functions overlap. Energy spikes. Repulsion emerges instantly. The resistance is what you interpret as solid. In conclusion, when you touch water, when you sit on a chair, when you shake someone's hand, you are never making contact in the classical sense. You are interacting with electromagnetic fields, a quantum probability cloud, exclusion principle. You are a structured patterns of energy interacting with another structured pattern of energy. Matter is not little hard balls stuck together. It is organized emptiness held together by forces. Bear in mind that if they were to theorize such a doctrine now, atomists would have no concept of the Pauli exclusion principle, no concept of electrons, no concept of quantum mechanics, no knowledge of subatomic particles, and no understanding of atomic orbitals. They would have become a laughingstock. They thought atoms were solid, indivisible bits of matter differing only in shape and size. The atomists and the contemporary heathens are another version of historical failure, trying to wave an amazing universe designed by an infinitely enlightened designer. Bottom line, an atheist could trip over a galaxy and still call it a coincidence. Give the non-believers fine-tuned to the decimal point and they will say an impressive accident. If you show them a symphony of physics, and they will insist the orchestra tuned itself. They demand evidence for a designer while standing inside the evidence. Let's look at our actions to understand why we sometimes act violently and beastly. Looking at our ill actions scientifically through the lens of evolutionary processes. Why do we act violently and nervously, often within anxiety-driven situations in modern life? In a real sense, our nervousness and many animal behaviors are echoes of an ancient survival system shaped by millions of years of evolution. It is not that we carry memories from millions of years ago. It is because we carry neural structures and survival circuits that were gradually built over the years. One of the most important structures involved in fear and nervousness is the amygdala. The amygdala detects threats, triggers a fear response, and activates the fight or flight mechanism. This system evolved long before humans existed. Mammals, reptiles, and even more primitive animals have threat detection circuits. When we feel sudden anxiety, our amygdala is frequently firing before our conscious mind even realizes why. Neuroscientist Paul D. MacLean proposed the triune brain model. The reptilian brain, basic survival, the limbic system, emotion, and the neocortex, reasoning. While modern neuroscience considers this model oversimplified, it captures an important truth. Our higher reasoning sits atop our ancient survival circuitry. So, when we feel sudden fear in a dark alley, startle at a loud noise, or experience social anxiety in a group, we are shaped by systems in an environment where survival was uncertain and danger frequent. In prehistoric times, being frightened and nervous kept one alive. If our ancestors ignored, for example, rustling in the bushes, they would be eaten. Didn't fear social rejection, they would be expelled from the tribe or face death. Too many risks are eliminated due to fear. Those with sensitive threat systems survived and passed on their genes. Modern world, ancient wiring, a job interview, a social gathering, speaking in public, an email notification, etc., as if it might be a tiger attacking. It is not memory, it is design. You do not remember being haunted somewhere in the desert. But your nervous system is built by the same evolutionary pressure that shaped early mammals and primates. For instance, heart rate spikes under pressure, pupils dilate, cortisol releases, muscle tense. This is inherited physiology, not inherited experience. The modern human dilemma. Here is the paradox. We evolved to cope with physical danger, a short burst of threat. But now we face chronic psychological stress, abstract worries, social comparison, and financial uncertainties. Our ancient brain does not distinguish well between a predator, a negative comment, and an uncertain future. But we also evolve regulation. The prefrontal cortex helps regulate fear response. It can reinterpret threats, calm the amygdala, reframe the situation, build resilience, and make better sense of the events. This is why practices like meditation, cognitive therapy, reflection, breathing exercises, and even simple walking, yoga, etc. help mitigate the problem. They strengthen regulatory circuits. So, what are we? We are an ancient nervous system living in modern complexity, equipped with neuroplasticity that has advanced our brain via billions of neurons and trillions of synapses, connecting junctures, a progressive limbic system, and more practical physiological systems in a perfect anatomical position, part animal, part reflective consciousness, and part evolutionary history with absolute guiding. Religiously speaking, part godly made, part influenced by Satan. Our nervous system is not weak. It is survival energy, a protective agent in a resilient, high alert mode. The question that remains is whether our fear, instinct, and nervous system are evolutionary products. Does that undermine spiritual views of the human being? Does evolution replace the soul? From purely biological perspectives, fear activates amygdala, moral disgust through limbic circuitry, love via oxytocin plus bonding systems. Spiritual awe alerts neural states. The part of the brain responsible for the progression from basic animal behavior to the modern human mind is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the largest part of the frontal lobe, which itself is part of the cerebral cortex. It involves planning and long-term thinking, decision-making, self-control, inhibiting impulses, moral reasoning, social behavior, abstract thinking, and language organization. Animals have a prefrontal cortex too, but in humans it is much larger and more complex, especially compared to body size. Early mammals already had a brainstem for survival, breathing, heart rate. The limbic system for emotion and instinct, basic cortex for sensory processing. But in humans, the neocortex expanded dramatically. This outer layer is responsible for higher cognition. With increased connectivity, there are more neurons, especially in the frontal region, more synaptic connection, a stronger long-distance wiring between brain areas, delayed brain development. Humans have a prolonged childhood. The prefrontal cortex fully matures around age 25. These long development periods allow learning complex social rules, cultural transmission, advanced language acquisition. The process took millions of years. Early primates lived about 60 million years ago with a larger visual cortex, better hand-eye coordination, social group living. Early hominins, for example, with slight brain enlargement, bipedal walking freed the hand. Bipedal meaning a form of terrestrial earthworldly locomotion where an animal moves by means of its two rear or lower limbs or legs. Humans are bipedal, habitually walking on two legs, a trait that distinguishes us as the only primates to do so for locomotion, and that gradually evolved in our ancestors over millions of years. About 2 million years ago, tool usage increased. Brain size expanded rapidly. Social complexity grew. Homo sapiens about 300,000 years ago had a highly developed prefrontal cortex, symbolic thought, language expansion, and cultural and abstract reasoning. Why did it expand? Scientists believe several pressures drove this: social complexity, social brain hypothesis, managing alliances, deception and cooperation. Tool use and planning required foresight and memory, which shaped neural development. Climate variability and flexible thinking helped survival. The core difference: animals are driven by instinct and immediate survival. Humans can override instinct using abstract reasoning. A highly developed prefrontal cortex is integrated with the emotional and memory systems. Why do humans still behave animal-like sometimes? Because the older parts of the brain are still there, and they are powerful. The emotional brain, older system, the amygdala, part of the limbic system, reacts fast to fear, anger, threat, attraction, dominance, etc. This system evolved long before humans. The rational brain, newer system. The prefrontal cortex is slower but more thoughtful. When you snap in anger, feel jealousy, panic, or act impulsively, that is usually the amygdala reacting before the prefrontal cortex fully regulates it. In evolution, survival required speed, not philosophical reaction. Your animal brain is still active. It is just layered with an advanced control system. Is human intelligence still evolving? Yes, but differently than before. Evolution hasn't stopped, but natural selection works differently now. Technology reduces survival pressure. Cultural evolution moves faster than biological evolution. Instead of brain size increasing, what's evolving may be disease resistance, social adaptability, and cognition specialization. Some scientists think modern evolution favors emotional intelligence, cooperation, and adaptivity to complex societies, but major structural brain changes take tens of thousands of years. We have abstract reasoning, long-term planning, symbolic language, complex moral systems, more cortical neurons, about 16 billion in the cortex alone, more long-distance brain connections, and a longer development period than animals. More neurons in the cortex, increased connectivity, and better integration between emotion and logic, and language-driven cognitive restructuring. It is not that humans have lost their instincts, it is that we sometimes gained the ability to override it. A strict materialist would say we are nothing more than evolved neural machinery. Thinkers like Richard Dawkins, who argue that natural selection fully explains, follow from evolution itself. First, when talking about selection and choice, one must rely on a sound mind. No selection is gambling. Natural selection must endure an enlightened mind. Life is not gambling. The evolution that Dawkins refers to explains the mechanism. It does not answer the question or its meaning. Is life meaningless? Evolution as a tool, not a denial. For instance, Ibn Arabi interprets evolution as the physical unfolding of potentials. He describes reality as a layered manifestation of conscious unfolding in stages. The physical unfolding of potentials, the gradual refinement of vehicles for awareness. Matter is organizing itself to host consciousness. Biology is the instrument, consciousness is the musician. The problem of reduction. If fear is just neurons firing, does that mean courage is an illusion? If love is just a chemical, does that make it less real? Is the chemical means emotional attachment to a point that sometimes is suicidal because of the loss of a loved one? Reductionists explain how experiences occur, but it does not invalidate experience. Water is just H2O, yet oceans exist. Evolution explains the body. It does not describe awareness itself. For example, why there is subjective experience? Why is there something it feels like to be alive? Why does matter produce consciousness, thoughts, and mind? Evolution may explain survival behaviors, but how can anyone survive without being mindful of the threat, without being aware of the threatening event in a dangerous, menacing situation? Who is the invisible, actively fluent energy relentlessly at work, making sense of the hazardous situation for the fight or flight task? Our ancient nervous system is not opposed to spirituality. It is the ground from which it rises. Fear is survival. Safety is a reflection. Reflection is philosophy. Philosophy is transcendence. Without evolutionary wiring, there would be no platform for spiritual awareness, knowing self and God. The animal brain is not the enemy of the soul. It may be its foundation, potentiated to advance where nobody is required infinitely, but pure spirit. We are not highly advanced animals, as the atheists claim. They claim spirituality is an adaptive illusion. What they claim is a travesty, a parody, or a misrepresentation at its pinnacle. Evolution explains behavior, but it does not answer why we feel moral obligation, longing for eternity, existential dissatisfaction, and so on. Consciousness cannot explain itself but through the visible soul. Science explains wiring. Metaphysics explores the source. If everything is an evolutionary process, where is moral accountability? Where is transcendence? Where is God? The evolutionary explanation without a sacred and infinitely enlightened being diminishes human dignity. The dogmatic behavior of the heathen, the mind of an infidel will not come to reason, even if they see, taste, hear, touch, and smell logic, the actual thesis. They analyze the brushstrokes of reality, but deny there was a painter. The universe whisper in constants, and light, they call it background noise. They trust the equations, admire the elegance, and then declare the elegance unemployed. They believe in the superb cosmic production, but deny the stunning producer. Feynman, a renowned scientist and physicist, said, "I preferred not knowing to believing something without evidence. I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned." Science explains natural phenomena without the need for supernatural explanation. There is no scientific evidence for a personal intervention deity. Claims about God must be open to questioning like any other claim. He leaned towards agnosticism, the philosophy that we do not know whether God exists. He resisted the dogma that resists questioning. But rejecting dogma is not the same as proving non-existence. These are the same theoretical physicists who believed the universe is too complex to know. He also believed that science is not proving absolute truth. It is about gradually becoming less wrong. But science doesn't claim certainty. It proposes an explanation, then attacks them. If they survive testing, they remain temporary. Then Albert Einstein, with relativity, refined what Newton manifested. Feynman persists in evidence. Feynman behaves as if we have no sense, are blinded or deaf, or have no knowledge of our universe or what we experience. What exactly does he mean by evidence? Albert Einstein spoke of a cosmic religious feeling. Isaac Newton saw the divine in mathematics. Werner Heisenberg said, "The deeper you think in physics, the more God appears at the bottom of the glass." Along with thousands of other scholarly minds, scientists, and philosophers, I am in awe of the magnificent tracks of a marvelous designer. A sunset produces awe, so does quantum theory, so does a newborn child, the black hole, many world interpretations, the constants, and millions of other things. One out of millions of awe-inspiring complexities is the scientific notion of many worlds interpretation. The many worlds interpretation is one way of understanding quantum mechanics. It was proposed in 1957 by physicist Hugh Everett III. At its core, it says something very radical. Every possible outcome of a quantum event actually happens, but in different branches of reality. The basic idea is that in quantum mechanics, particles like electrons or photons don't have a single definite state until they are measured. Instead, they exist in a superposition, a combination of multiple possibilities. For instance, an electron can be spinning both up and down simultaneously. A particle can go through two slits at once, as exhibited in the double-slit experiment. Most interpretations say that when you measure it, the wave function collapses and only the result becomes real. But many worlds say something different. The wave function never collapses. Instead, the universe splits into branches. In each branch, one possible outcome is realized. For example, imagine you flip a quantum coin. In one branch of the universe, it lands heads. In another branch, it lands tails. Both outcomes occur, but you or I experience only one branch. Traditionally, quantum mechanics, like the Copenhagen's interpretation, was influenced by Niels Bohr, requires this mysterious collapse of the wave function during measurement. Everett thought, why introduce collapse at all? Just let the mathematics evolve naturally. The mathematics of quantum mechanics already predicts superposition. Therefore, he took it literally. They are branches of the same underlying quantum reality. It continuously splits whenever quantum events have multiple possible outcomes. Branching happens constantly, trillions of times per second. It implies an enormous, possibly infinite, number of parallel universes or many worlds. Many worlds raise profound questions. If every choice branches, what are you? Is there a version of you that made every possible decision? Does this eliminate randomness or relocate it? You are just a physical quantum system that splits into multiple versions when branching occurs. Does this mean a possible universe? Possibly, but not a separate bubble universe floating in space. Bottom line, whichever way you look at either heaven or hell, multiverse universes, evolution, or whatever, there must exist a viable superintendence, a gigantically, infinitely enlightened CEO, an immaculately stunning designer that oversees such unbelievably complicated events. It is also interesting what science believes about death. In physics, energy is conserved. It changes form, matter. Your atoms get rearranged, not destroyed. They cannot be annihilated according to the conservative laws of the universe. The particles in your body, anyone's body, are ancient and will continue after you. So, no death in this sense means that your pattern ends. But your particles continue in the universe. The person is gone. The physics remains. You stop as a story, but not as a stardust. As you can see, many versions reveal the secret of life and how human beings specifically deal with them. It is tempting to talk about Carl Jung, who is as good as, if not better than, the world's top psychologist about what happens to the soul after death. Jung believed that consciousness, as we know it, ends with the brain, but the deeper psyche, the soul, may not be confined to the body. He stated that the psyche exhibits signs of not being entirely bounded by space and time. His idea is that the ego, our everyday identity, dies with the body, but the deeper psyche may continue in another form and dimension. He compared death to waking from a dream of earthly life. The soul or a spirit returns to the collective unconscious. This is the deep layer of the psyche shared by all humanity that contains universal archetypes. He suggested that the personal ego dissolves and the psyche may reinstate itself into vast collective layers, like a drop returning to the ocean. Interestingly, Rumi, the Persian poet and philosopher, suggested that long before Carl Jung did, believing that death is a transformation and not an annihilation, that nature transforms everything and wastes nothing. Because the psyche is part of nature, he reasoned that it likely transforms rather than disappears. Death is the liberation of the soul from the body. After a heart attack in 1944, Jung had a powerful near-death vision. He described being floating above Earth, seeing Earth from space, and approaching a cosmic temple. He felt he was about to enter a place where all knowledge of life's meaning would be revealed, but doctors revived him. These experiences, as well as deep interaction and dialogue with many patients of near-death experience, convinced him that the soul might continue beyond physical death. He wrote that existence after death is non-spatial, beyond individuality and timeless. A central process in Jung's work is individuation, the development of the soul toward wholeness. Jung speculated this process might continue after death because the psyche seems oriented toward completion beyond a single lifetime. His final philosophical stance was, it is wiser to assume that something continues rather than that everything ends abruptly. I accordingly believe that everything is orderly and meaningful, making life possible. Death is not an exception. Shortly before he died in 1961, Jung wrote, "The psyche is not under obligation to live only on the surface of time and space." In simple terms, the ego, self-important, self-image, dies. The deeper soul survives. It may return to the collective unconsciousness or transform into another state of being. The exact nature of that state is beyond human comprehension. One of the most mysterious reflections that Carl Jung wrote late in life appears in his final autobiographical work, referencing memories, dreams, and reflections. In his book, he openly discussed something he had hesitated to say earlier. The psyche may already exist, at least in part, outside time and space while we are alive. The psyche may not be bound to space and time. He developed the idea of synchronicity, meaning events in the mind and events in the world happen together, not because one causes the other, but because they are connected through a deeper order. He concluded that the psyche may not exist only inside the brain. Instead, it may belong to a deeper level of reality where mind and matter are connected. Saying the individual ego is temporary, the deeper layer is called the collective unconscious. It contains universal archetypes and patterns shared by humanity. He believed that a large part of the mind is unconscious, and modern neuroscience supports this view. Feynman, a Nobel Prize-winning American theoretical physicist, 1918 to 1988, suggested at the quantum level, particles don't behave like solid objects. In everyday life, an object is in one place at one time. But in quantum physics, a particle, like an electron or photon, behaves more like a wave of possibilities. According to superposition, a particle can exist in many possible positions simultaneously until it is measured. Feynman's radical idea: particles take all possible paths. He proposed that when a particle travels from point A to point B, it doesn't choose one path. Instead, it travels every possible path simultaneously. Mathematically, the particles behave as if they exist in many places. In the famous double slit experiment, a single electron is fired towards two slits. The electron behaves as if it passes through both slits simultaneously. It interferes with itself like a wave, but when we measure which slit it goes through, the superposition disappears and it shows up only in one place. Large objects, people, chairs, planets, matter in general, lose this effect due to quantum decoherence, which forces matter-oriented things into a definite position. But a rational mind should realize that the quantum states deal with invisible, unseen realities, where the human mind, memory, intelligent thoughts, feelings, and emotions are no exception. They must qualify as applicable to the quantum characteristic state, not limited to the material specification and criteria. Feynman stated that if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you do not understand quantum mechanics, and rightly so. In short, a particle explores all possible paths simultaneously. Mathematically, it behaves as if it exists in many places at once. Observation collapses it to one reality. He suggested that a positron can be interpreted as an electron moving backward in time. Quantum particles explore many paths in space-time, not just one. Time is also a mind-blowing philosophical consequence, since time in fundamental physics may be more flexible than our everyday experience. If particles explore all possible histories, the universe might not have a single path until it is observed, giving you the hint that human beings are not only consumers, but producers as well, without which no possible being is possible. Physicists later developed the quantum eraser experiment. In this setup, information about a particle's path is erased after the particle has already been detected. Yet the final pattern on the detector changes retroactively. It looks as if the future choice rewrites the past pattern. Even Albert Einstein was deeply troubled by these ideas and famously said, God does not play dice with the universe. Yet experiments continue to confirm the strange prediction of quantum mechanics. Something about our thoughts, the essence of thoughts, the substance of thinking, if it even has one. Thoughts are a pattern of information. They are not made of matter in the usual sense. They are abstract structures, relationships, and signals. In this sense, a thought is constituted by the relationship among concepts, memories, and sensation. It is like software. The program exists, but it isn't made of the physical plastic or silicon of the computer. It's the pattern running on it. Scientists generally agree that thoughts are not physical objects. You cannot hold or weigh them, and that one cannot see, hear, touch, or taste them. They are recognized as complex dynamic pattern of electrochemical activities and information processing. In the brain, they are emergent properties. The question remains, if thoughts are electrochemical, why can't we see or experience them? They have weird properties that are not scientifically possible to manifest in many of what they're made of or what they are. I truly believe they have quantum-like properties, meaningful energy vibration. Some scholars or mystical traditions believe that thought is a kind of subtle energy. They vibrate or resonate in consciousness. In terms of pure consciousness, thoughts may be manifestations of awareness itself. Suppose consciousness is fundamental, as some interpretation of quantum mechanics, panpsychism, or Eastern philosophy suggest. Thoughts are forms appearing within this field of awareness, like ripples on a pond. They don't have substance in a physical sense, yet they are a real experience. Some thinkers speculate that if consciousness has quantum-like properties, thoughts might be akin to quantum information, existing in superposition and not tied to any single location. And I believe if thoughts were tied to any single location, you could not imagine, as if it were real, that you are walking on the moon or anything that pleases you with no limitations. In short, thoughts are non-material pattern of information, experience, or consciousness. They have no mass or atoms, but exist as meaningful, perceived phenomena that should awaken the scientists, the neurologists, the physicists, that no rational mind believes a material brain can produce such inspiring intelligence, thoughtfulness, IQ mind, utterly contrary to the idea of a material brain, unless the brain is an absolutely energy vibrating source, enabling the brain to deal with the unseen senses so conductively, and the nervous system. They ripple across the vast sea of consciousness. Each droplet carries a unique taste of experiment, some heavy with emotion, some light and fleeting. Though you cannot see the ocean itself, the droplets leave a pattern like the waves of meaning you sense. A thought ignites, it illuminates, then fades, leaving a trace in the memory. Some sparks are quick flashes of insight, others burn longer, shaping who we are. Your mind moves like a fire dancer, constantly creating, consuming, transforming, imagining, dreaming, inspiring, and thousands of other things. They are the soul of experience, giving a fleeting shape. I like to conclude with the hermetic law of the universe, cosmos, and beyond, and the entire being, the Hermetic principle, the one behind the many. It teaches that all clear diversity in the universe is an expression of a single underlying reality, summarizing that the all is one and the one is all. The universe looks fragmented: stars, people, atoms, thoughts. But Hermetic thinkers say this fragmentation, this separateness, is only referencing the surface appearance. Behind it is one source, one law, one underlying substance or intelligence known as the all. That everything that exists is a manifestation of this single principle. Therefore, matter, energy, mind, consciousness, life, and all beings are different expressions of the same underlying principle. It believes the universe is not fragmented and rejects the notion that reality is made of separate, independent pieces. That reality is interconnected and continuous. For example, atoms form molecules, molecules form cells, cells form organisms, and organisms form ecosystems. This hierarchy exhibits unity expressed at different scales. The fragmentation we perceive is a limitation of human perception, not a property of certain reality itself. The hidden laws governing everything. The Hermetic tradition holds that one set of universal principles governs everything, from galaxies to human thought. These principles are often summarized as the Hermetic laws, including mentalism. Reality originates from the mind or consciousness. Correspondence, as above, so below, patterns repeat across scales. Vibration, everything in motion. Polarity. Opposites are two extremes of the same thing, like the sides of a coin. Rhythm, everything flows in cycles. Cause and effect. Nothing happened randomly or by accident. Gender, creative forces exist in complementary forms. And I add that there is no such thing as nothingness, since the void is saturated with meaningfully wonderful particles, purposefully coming in and out of existence, leaving no possibility of a void. There is one deeper law of unity. Hermetic state, that which is above is like that which is below. The meaning is that the same underlying law operates at every level of reality. Cited, atomic systems resemble solar systems. Human psychology mirrors cosmic principles. Pattern repeat in nature. The universe is therefore fractal, like one pattern repeating at many scales. Everything ultimately comes from the same essence. Physics shows that matter and energy are interchangeable. E equals mc squared. Quantum field theory suggests all particles arise from underlying fields. Cosmology traces everything to a single origin in the Big Bang. This unity is more metaphysical. The universe is a single living system expressing itself in countless forms. Why do humans perceive separation? Our senses divide reality into categories: self versus world, matter versus mind, life versus death, subject versus object, and unlimited more These are conceptual boundaries, not real divisions. Everything participates in the same universal process. Realizing unity. There is unity behind diversity. Once a person understands this unity, the fear subsides, ego boundaries soften, perception of meaning increases, the individuals grasp that they are not apart from the universe but an expression of it. The ocean and wave analogy. Each wave appears separate, but every wave is made of the same water. Similarly, humans, stars, atoms, and thoughts are like the same cosmic ocean. The hidden law is unity itself. Reality is orderly, not random. Nothing is truly separate. Everything participates in cosmic order. Modern science also finds repetition at different levels. Atoms resemble a solar system. Galaxies form web-like structures. Neurons form networks resembling a cosmic web. The universe appears self-similar across scales, sometimes called a fractal structure. Feynman's view, reality is simpler beneath. He emphasized that nature might be built from a surprisingly simple underlying rule. In particle physics experiments, hundreds of particles appear, but most are combinations of a few fundamental ones. The important difference between Hermeticism and science. Hermetic philosophy claims that the universe arises from a mind or consciousness. Science has not yet demonstrated that believing in things that cannot be seen. Physics shows the universe has deep unity. Everything arises from common physical laws. But it does not yet conclude that reality is fundamentally mental or spiritual. The Big Bang picture. Both perspectives provide coverage of one remarkable idea. The universe may not be a collection of independent things. Instead, it may be a single interconnected system, expressing itself in many forms. Or, as Hermetic philosophy put it, the many are the expression of the one. Interestingly, the deeper physicists explore reality, the less fragmented it appears. Particles disappear into fields. Fields reduce to deeper symmetries. Space and time may emerge from deeper structures as one. That at the deepest level, the universe may be astonishingly simple. For centuries, physics has been moving toward unification. Initially, different phenomena looked unrelated: falling apples, planetary motion, electricity, magnetism, light, and infinitely more. But scientists gradually discovered they are different expressions of deeper laws. Isaac Newton showed that the same law explains an apple falling, the moon orbiting the earth, and the motion of planets. One law governed both heaven and earth. That was the first glimpse of unity. Electricity and magnetism become one. Before James Maxwell, a scientist of the 1800s, taught that electricity and magnetism were separate forces, Maxwell discovered they are one. His equation unified them into a single force called electromagnetism. Maxwell's equations predicted that light itself is an electromagnetic wave, proving that electricity, magnetism, and light were the same underlying phenomenon. Then, in the early 1900s, Einstein unified space and time and made an even deeper discovery. They formed a single structure called space-time, explained in general relativity. Gravity itself is not really a force. Instead, mass bends space-time, and objects move along those curves. Einstein then spent the rest of his life searching for a single unified field theory that would explain everything. Quantum field theory, the universe as fields. Modern physics describes the universe through quantum field theory. In this picture, the universe is surrounded by invisible fields. Particles are simply vibrations of those fields. For example, an electron is the vibration of the electric field. A photon is a vibration of a magnetic field. Quark is a vibration of electric fields. So, what we call matter is really patterns in underlying fields. This exhibits a strong form of unity. Feynman believed that nature appears complicated because we observe surface effects. But beneath the surface, there may be a very simple rule. In quantum physics, he introduced the idea that particles explore all possible paths simultaneously, known as the path integral approach. Yet the result of all those possibilities collapses into precise mathematical laws. Feynman suspected that a remarkably simple mathematical principle might ultimately describe nature. The search for the ultimate theory. Today, physicists search for the final unification. Two main frameworks try to explore this unification. String theory suggests that all particles are tiny vibrating strings. Different vibrations give rise to electrons, photons, quarks, and other particles. So the entire universe might come from a single fundamental vibrating entity. Then there is quantum gravity. Another attempt is to unify quantum physics with gravity. Some theories suggest that space and time themselves emerge from quantum information networks. I believe the essence of all incredible innovation and amazing gears created through information. This means reality is built from relationships rather than objects. What science says is that matter is fields. Fields are deeper symmetries. Space-time is emergent structure. Information is the key. The deeper we go, the fewer fundamental ingredients remain. It seems we are getting closer to God, the very source and the sole reason of all that exists. Richard Feynman admitted that the deeper we understand the laws of nature, the more mysterious their origin become. Why does the universe obey elegant mathematical laws at all? Science can describe the laws, but the existence of the law itself remains a profound mystery. That the one hidden law lies behind the universe is not entirely foreign to modern physics. The trajectory of scientific discoveries indeed reveals deeper unity. One of the most shocking discoveries in physics is quantum entanglement. Two particles that interact become entangled, meaning they behave as one unified system, even if separated by light years. If one particle is measured, the other instantly reflects the change. Many physicists now think the universe might be deeply interconnected at the fundamental level. Separation may partly be a feature of how we observe reality, not of how reality actually is. Everything is mathematically linked. This perspective is explored in interpretations such as those proposed by Hugh Everett III. Space may arise from entanglement, suggesting that space-time emerges from networks of quantum relationships. So, the universe is not like a machine made of parts. It is more like an organism, a field, a single unfolding process. Another concept pushing toward unity is the holographic principle. It says that all information inside a region of space might be encoded on its boundary surface. This means the universe behaves somewhat like a hologram, where the whole picture is encoded in each region. In such a model, reality is far more unified than it appears. Richard Feynman once said, "The most remarkable thing about nature is that it can be described by simple mathematical laws at all. The mystery of consciousness. Science can explain the brain's electrical and chemical activity, but a fundamental question remains. Why do neurons firing in the brain create awareness, thoughts, feelings, and the sense of I?" The problem is called the hard problem of consciousness. David Chalmers popularized the term. Even if we map or carve every neuron in the brain, the question will remain: how does the objective matter create subjective experience? Some scientists propose that the brain may not generate consciousness entirely on its own. Instead, it might organize, filter, or interact with a deeper field of consciousness, probably the human soul. This notion has been compared to a radio receiver. The radio does not create the music, it receives and translates signals already present in the electromagnetic field. Some philosophers wonder whether the brain could function in a way similar to consciousness. This idea has also been explored by the thinker Carl Jung, who suggested that individual minds might be connected to a deeper collective unconsciousness. The universe as a conscious system. Some modern philosophers propose that consciousness might be a fundamental property of reality. This position is called panpsychism. According to panpsychism, basic forms of awareness might exist at the most fundamental level of matter. Complex consciousness, like human awareness, emerges from a combination of these basic units. In other words, consciousness is woven into the fabric of reality. Information as the foundation of reality. Another influential idea comes from physics and neuroscience, which holds that reality might be fundamentally information oriented. For example, John Wheeler, a physicist, suggested that physical reality arises from information processes. If reality is fundamentally informational, then consciousness, which processes information, may be deeply connected to the structure of the universe and beyond. The observer in quantum mechanics. Quantum physics introduces another strange concept. Observation seems to play a role in producing or determining outcomes. In experiments like the double-slit experiment, particles behave differently depending on whether they are measured. The observer usually refers to any physical measurement interaction, not necessarily a conscious mind, telling you the universe is mental. Individual consciousness is not separate. It is a localized expression of a universal mind. The deeper we explore reality, the more the two profound questions mysteriously reflect one another. 1. Why does the universe exist and obey elegant laws? 2. Why conscious experience exists at all? Indicating a limitlessly awesome intelligence should be involved. It is not out of place to say that the two questions, the two mysteries, may be ultimately related. May God bless you all.
This has been Lopsided Minds, a production of Envoy of Lights. The journey finds its truth. Continue with final reflection.